Round 15 of the F1A Championship Series is being held at the Monza circuit in Italy, and with the championship already wrapped up, there was a Renault benefit, with Dizzo and Alicat locking out the front row. F15 Active and Jester F1 was set with 3rd and 4th for McLaren, with OTT South and the Pistol 1 5th and 6th. At the start, with nothing left to play for in the season except for pride, Dizzo could have been forgiven for giving somebody else a chance, but it wasn't to be. The Pistol jumping the start himself, but the rest of the field getting away cleanly around him. Although it was the McLaren of Jester F1 a little bit slow off the line that cost him a number of positions at the start. Shiv Shahani had his fair share of woes at Ascari, running wide early on in the race and being very lucky to maintain his car in a straight line and keeping it off the barriers, whilst OTT South had issues under braking into Turn 1 all day. This the first of many incidents at Turn 1 for the Toyota driver, almost costing position to Jester F1 and Borgi 41 in the Toro Rosso. But that of course led to a very strong battle pack early on in the race, with OTT South unable to hold on under the pressure and spinning his car at the second of the chicanes and costing himself position. It was then a strong battle between Jester F1 and Borgi 41 into the Lesmos, not really renowned for overtaking spot, and Borgi 41 found out exactly why when Jester forced him wide off the track and into a brake board and out of position. But it was Dazza and the Red Bull, having all types of issues out of Lesmo 2, who became our first and only retirement of the race very early on, almost taking OTT South with him, who was lucky to have a drivable car after slamming into the back of the Red Bull as it rebounded off the barrier. Webby had his fair share of concerns in the Honda, running wide at the second Lesmo early in the race, costing himself a number of seconds there, along with everybody else, whilst Alicat had issues maintaining his Renault in a straight line under brakes into Turn 1. This was to be a theme of the day for the race, with many drivers having issues. Alicat lucky to maintain 4 wheels on the car after contact with the barrier. Shiv Shahani again at Turn 1, proving that he struggles with that car, and he spins it coming off the ripple strip there. Bad traction puts him onto the grass, costing him a number of positions, and it only went from bad to worse for the Midland driver, as he went off at Ascari again, put himself into the barrier, and significant damage to his Midland, although he did manage to continue on with his race once he recovered. Webby here into Turn 1 had his fair share of issues as well, spinning it around and almost beaching his car on the curb, lucky to recover his Honda in one piece and with still a running engine after revving it, trying to get off that curb, eventually getting away with it and breathing a sigh of relief in the cockpit of that Honda. It wouldn't last for long though, as through the second Lesmo his car got a little bit out from underneath him and he spun it off the road into and backed it into the wall, and he was lucky to drive away with his car still in one piece, thanking the low damage physics for this mod. It didn't get any better for Borgi 41. He also ran wide at the second Lesmo. Thankfully for him, he was able to keep it off the walls. Andrew F1 was enjoying one of his strongest races for Super Aguri, battling hard with Jester F1 for the final position on the podium. Although they had F15 Active and Alicat to contend with, both were fighting very difficult races, whilst Borgi 41 just could not nail these chicanes, taking too much curb and spinning his Scuderia Toros around, and himself almost beaching it on the curb as well. OTT South, coming out of the pits, found that cold tyres and cold brakes don't necessarily work through Turn 1 and had to shortcut the track to make sure he didn't spin around and get into the path of race leader Dizzo and second placed Alicat. It wasn't long after that Alicat came out of the pits in a tough fight for second position with F15 Active. It was now going to be a waiting game for the second of the Renault drivers to find out if he'd done enough to maintain position. Having Shiv Shahani around him on track was probably not something that was instilling him with confidence. Dizzo, however, continued to dominate strongly, putting in the strong laps where it mattered to maintain his gap. before he himself dived for the pit lane not that long after. F15 active in his fight for second position, pushing hard whilst the Renaults navigated their pit stops. The question for him would be, would he come out of his pit stop in front of Alicat? That was the main fight for the McLaren driver on this day. As he came out of the pits, it was going to be very close, but he'd done enough. F15 active comfortably in front of Alicat, with a gap that surprised many pundits as they ran down into turn 1. Andrew F1 continued his strong run, as he was now in clear air and running comfortably in second place behind Dizzo. The question for him, of course, was could he do enough to get in front of the second McLaren for Jester F1? And as he dove for the pit, it was all to play for fourth place. Jester F1 coming through and taking back that position. So Andrew F1 not doing enough despite a string of strong laps, was unable to make that position on Jester F1. But of course the battle was not over, these two fighting it out right until the end of this race. So Dizzo exited from his pit stop comfortably still in the lead of this Grand Prix. And he was leading the way from F15 active, who would maintain position over Alicat. So Alicat, the second of the Renaults, in a podium-paying position, third place. Would be disappointed to have lost second place. But it was Jester F1 and Andrew F1 who were having the battle of the race for fourth place. Andrew F1 very much stronger through the corners. Jester F1 with a significant straight line speed advantage. The biggest problem for these two was making sure they didn't make contact throughout the race, as Andrew closed right up on the back of Jester F1 through the majority of the corners. But a very strong race from the Super Guru driver, one of his best of the season, putting serious pressure onto the man who's third place in the championship. Tough day out for Pistol continued as he spun out of the second Lesmo, collecting the barrier very heftily there, but managing to continue on to salvage what he could from the day. Borgie41, his teammate, continued to have issues under brakes as he spun his car around at turn 1, getting out of the way of OTT South, and it really was survival of the fittest out on the Monza track on this day. Borgie41 almost lost his race soon after when he clattered into the barriers on the exit of the second Lesmo. But he was able to survive. And so it was Dizzo on the final lap, coming through the Parabolica, who came through to claim his 13th victory of the season. It was a significant victory for the man who's already wrapped up the championship. It was a dominant performance. Pole position, comfortably, drive of the day. Didn't really have anyone to contend with his teammate playing rear gunner. A strong performance from F15 active saw him take second place, with Alicat getting the second of the Renaults onto the podium in third. And it was the strongest battle of the day between Jester F1 and Andrew F1. It went right down to the line, under a second, covering the two drivers as they crossed the finish line. Both working very hard. Jester F1 coming out on top at the end of the day, over the top of the Super Guru driver, but it's a drive that Andrew F1 could very much be proud of. And so at the conclusion of a very tiring Italian Grand Prix at Monza, it was Dizzo taking the victory out of F15 active. Alicat was third, Jester F1 fourth from Andrew F1, Borgie41, the Pistol 1, Webby, Shiv Shahani, OTT South, and Dazza was our only retirement of the day.